Welcome to Sound Test. My name is Bryan, and this is Now Spinning, the show where I look at a bunch of records, vinyl records, and talk about them and why I love these albums and, the condition of them, the packaging, and all that stuff. So we have a double feature today. We have two albums. We have Common's Can I Borrow a Dollar and Common's Resurrection. So these are Common's first two albums. Can I Borrow a Dollar? This is actually its 30th anniversary. It was released on October 6, 1992. And Resurrection was not too far from it, a little bit later, 2 years later in 94. So I wanted to talk about these albums because old school Common and his very early years are very different from, the modern Common signature Common sound, One thing I will say about Common, he has a definite style, and that style is, that really neo soul, really relaxed, cool, very conscious based, rap. But Common has experimented a lot over the years. He has a lot of different types of genres that he himself has went through, different things that he experimented with. Some worked, some didn't. And, it's kind of interesting to actually see his progress through the years. So let's start first with Can I Borrow a Dollar? So this is his very first album. This is his first, shot and trying to make it mainstream. So there's two sides to this. There's the dollar side, which reflects the first few albums, and then there's the cents side. So, when you actually see, you hear some of the part of the album, and it's not on the album itself, but originally Common's name was Common Sense. That was his rap name, and for legal reasons, he actually couldn't use Common Sense. That was already trademarked, so he just shortened the name to just Common. So that's why there's a dollar side and then a cent side, dollar side because of the name of the album and cents for his original name of Common Sense. So first thing that you would notice when you're listening to this album, you're going to realize that it is nothing like what you would expect for Common. So the idea of how Common sounds as a rapper or his type of music that you already have pre-established in your mind, that's not what is in Can I Borrow a Dollar? And I remember I listened to this, after when I was in high school. I first listened to this album after listening to Water for Chocolate, which is just one of my top hip hop albums of all time. I love that album. After listening to that, I've listened to B and Finding Forever and Universal Mind Control. That's when the first time, after all those albums, that was the first time I heard this. And it feels like this album's really not talked a lot about, even from Common fans and things like that. And it's probably because this album is so radically different. So this is the early 90s, and it really sounds like the early 90s. This is a high energy Common. He's almost everything is fast paced. It's a different sound from him because he's kind of I don't want to say a hype beast, but it's just is constantly jump up. And it's not party music. It's definitely not party hip hop music, but it's definitely stuff with heavy bass and lots of drum samples, lots of just samples, period, from either other artists or comedy tapes or from movie scenes. It's a lot of things that were conducive of the time, but not conducive of what we think of Common. And it's, he's a Chicago-based rapper, and, he makes it known a lot in his album that he's from Chicago, but it's also just the lyrics themselves, they're way more aggressive than Common usually would do. And I don't know if immature is the right word, but a lot of times he sounds very immature in this album, just immature in his inflections and his lyrics and the subject matter of his songs. Like, don't come into here thinking this is a conscious comment. This is not a comment where to, you know, you're to think about deep thoughts and about the societal breakdown and, you know, the African American plight. That's not that's not what this album's for. With that being said, would you kind of like get past that shell shock of like, this is how early Common sounds? It's not a bad album. It's just something that's, is it one of Common's more weaker albums? Maybe, but every once in a while I kind of get in the mood to want to listen to a few tracks off of this album. And there's 13 tracks off this album. A few of my standouts are probably the ones that were like the singles at the time. So I like Penny for My Thoughts. That's what the album starts off on. Take It Easy, Breaker 19, Justin and Ricka Rhyme, Puppy Child, Soul by the Pound. All of those are great pieces. But it's again, you just have to kind of get yourself in that mindset. You know, it's kind of weird, but is a Common talking about tricks and hoes is like, it's weird to think about that. And he has like elements of that in some other albums, like in Like Water for Chocolate. He has a song like that, and he's clearly playing a character in that song, but he's not. It's hard to tell if he's really playing a character or if he's just kind of just within that, you know, Chicago culture at the time. So, you know, it's a very interesting album from that standpoint. And he has kind of like he does this like thing a lot where he does a high pitch squeak. I don't know how to describe it, but like he'll do like the first syllable of word high pitch, and then he shifts down to his like regular rapping voice. Yeah, it's weird. Lyrical content, again, it's nothing deep. It's nothing like mind blowing with his lyrical delivery or anything like that. So, and if it sounds like I'm kind of like making this album seem like it's terrible or as bad, and it's not. It's just, it's a very middle of the road, you know, early 90s hip hop album. And, you know, even just looking at the cover, you know, you wouldn't tell that this is Common. And I probably should show the back as well. So yeah, it's an interesting album, definitely. I do encourage you to go listen to it just to see where Common's roots were. So his second album was Resurrection. And Resurrection is a big change from Can I Borrow a Dollar? So Resurrection definitely sounds way more mature. And you can hear that from like the very first track, Resurrection. So, you know, Resurrection kind of had more of a jazz hip hop feel. So it feels like a bigger influence of people like A Tribe Called Quest was more of a bigger influence in this album compared to Can I Borrow a Dollar? And, you know, you hear there's a lot more jazz samples, there's more songs that are way slower tempo, way more of a, you know, relaxed kind of feel to a lot of these. And there's some really great like tracks in here. So this album starts off like absolutely strong with Resurrection. Resurrection is a really great track. Then it goes to I Used to Love Her. And I Used to Love Her is, you know, Common kind of going through the history of hip hop, but personifying it through a woman. And so, you know, stuff like that completely give you a different feel for Common compared to that. You know, I feel like Can I Borrow a Dollar was just to have fun. You know, it's a fun record, but Resurrection had kind of those sprinkles of that neo soul aspect of Common, the more conscious, you know, rap aspect of Common. Book of Life is another like great one where he just kind of like just talking about his problems and you know how he's going through life and how he's perceiving things, and you know he sounds more mature. He feels more mature. You know, the topics he's going on. And then, you know, don't get me wrong, there's still some lighter hearted stuff. You know, like Some Shit I Wrote or Chapter 13, well, even Chapter 13, Rich Man versus Poor Man, is a more relaxed, piece, but he still has those conscious elements in there. It's still kind of a very classic hip hop sound, but now he's talking about the disparity between somebody's rich or somebody who's poor. Communism is great. This Is Me. That's a fantastic one. In My Own World, Check the Method. That's another fantastic one. I feel like there's a lot more stronger individual tracks on this one, and just the product as a whole is just way stronger than Can I Borrow a Dollar. Vinyl wise for this one, I don't have any, special printing of this. So we just have a standard LP. And he named each side too. So east side of Stoney, that's essentially the A side, and the B side is the west side of Stoney. I don't know if there's like any, big, overall meaning to those, but the album itself is pretty consistent. What's kind of cool in here, the final track of it is Pop's rap. And this was kind of like the first time we actually had that trend of, Common inviting his father onto the album to kind of just talk, and it wasn't the full, neo soul aspect in it. It was just kind of taking a track from an earlier part of the album and just doing just the instrumental, adding a little bit of stuff into it. And then, Pop's rap is kind of over that. He's talking about life experiences and stuff and things like that. So it wasn't a big, fully orchestrated version like we see kind of later, or this big retrospective, introspective type of thing that we do see later. In terms of the backside, it's not much. You have a lot of linear notes where there's like a big chunk where Common is just doing thank yous. There's no inlet on this, and just kind of some old school pictures from Chicago. I'm assuming this is Chicago at the time. And I know, and it's just, even the cover of the album gives you a different feel. It's like, Can I Borrow a Dollar? This is just more so, all right, this is me and all my homies, he's holding a literal, cup for Chicago. And the design is a busy design, it just reeks of the 90s, and by the way, I got this album, I believe this is original pressing. I got this from my friend Sean. He had just saw it in the wild, and he was just like, hey, do you want this? And I was like, yeah, get it to me. Because if I'm not mistaken, I don't think they've ever re-released this. They may have did something recently for the 30th, or maybe something even 10 years ago, but I almost never see this, I don't ever see a brand new copy of Can I Borrow a Dollar? And this was a re-release. The Resurrection I have, I purchased it as a brand new copy. But yeah, and there's still elements of Can I Borrow a Dollar in Resurrection here and there. But Resurrection is a markedly different sound for Common. And, he kind of really goes further into that when we get to One Day It'll Make Sense, his third album. And that was even a bigger gap, because I think One Day It'll Make Sense was 97 and this was 94. So he had kind of 3 years to kind of explore his style. He still did songs for other things here and there, but One Day It Will All Make Sense, that's when he was just really in that neo soul era. And partly that was during the time with I don't know if it had influenced anything, his relationship with Erykah Badu, but maybe it had some type of, influence on his sound, influence on his writing process or his music. And then I feel like his magnum opus was Like Water for Chocolate. And I think that was the quintessential Common sound to me. And, he kind of built, he he eased into a early 2000s, you know, R&B sound with B and you know, Finding Forever. But yeah, it's still interesting to see Common's kind of progression. And then, you know, his last two albums, completely different sound, but it still kind of have his root etched in the beginnings of Resurrection. So yeah, that's Common's first two albums, Can I Borrow a Dollar and Resurrection. If you haven't heard these albums, yeah, go ahead and listen to them. They're very interesting. Again, just keep your perspective different if you're used to modern Common, or, you know, if you came into Common during that B era, during the Finding Forever era. Yeah, it's a different sound, different style for Common, but, you know, it was the planting of seeds to get into his eventual style. So, hope y'all like that. My name is Bryan. This has been Sound Test, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.